Nazi rally at Madison Square Garden. The election is lost because a comedian offended Puerto Ricans. First-hand experience. Stories to tell from both inside Madison Square Garden and inside an Uber. 2, Brad Howard, Democratic Strategist, on Joe Rogan and Donald Trump. 3, audio crack, an audio treat. I've got something you need to hear when it comes to baseball, when it comes to World Series, when it comes to Fox and Friends. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. If you're listening on terrestrial radio, it's always on demand by heading over to Apple or Spotify and hitting subscribe. And that way you can play the Will Cain Show at your leisure, on demand, however it fits your life. If you join us every Monday through Thursday live at 12 o'clock Eastern Time, you can see us on Facebook and YouTube and hit subscribe on YouTube and become a member of the Willisha. Yesterday, huge rally at Madison Square Garden. Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, and many others, including comedian Tony Hinchcliffe. He has the Kill Tony Show based out of Austin, Texas. It is a place of ensemble comedy that often includes Shane Gillis, Joe Rogan, and many others. Tony Hinchcliffe was invited to speak at Madison Square Garden, and he was early. He was one of the earliest speakers in what added up to be about a 8.5-hour event. Hinchcliffe took to the microphone and did what he does. He is a roast comic, and he told jokes. And here we are today with the center of the story now, Kill Tony. Here was the joke that now has everyone talking about Puerto Ricans.
You know, there's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Okay. All right. Okay. We're getting there. Now, again, normally I don't follow the national anthem, everybody. This isn't exactly a perfect comedy setup.
So the setup might actually be the story. Tinfoil Pat, Two-A-Days Dan, Young Establishment James. This morning I broadcast from Yankee Stadium. I broadcast from the Bronx. And I got into a car afterwards to head back to my hotel and ultimately come in here to 1211 Avenue of the Americas to head into Fox News. When I got into my car, I was already aware that the internet made this joke the story of the rally at Madison Square Garden. When you scroll across your Twitter feed and you see that this has become sort of the battle line, this has become the Alamo between left and right, between Republican and Democrat, I think you can immediately shove yourself into corners. You can immediately shove yourself into a defensive posture. You can either say this is the worst joke ever told to man, and that is what is emblazoned across the chyrons at CNN. Or you can tell yourself, this is ridiculous. This is everybody having lost their sense of humor, and this is everyone seeking to be offended. And I think that's where I would have woken up this morning. I think that's where I would have been if my filter through the world had been a scroll through X, if that's how I thought this morning about Kill Tony or Puerto Ricans. And I have to ask you guys as a quick around the horn, is that not how you felt today? Tinfoil Pat, I imagine you're like, lighten up, it's a joke.
Yeah, I don't get offended very easily by jokes, so.
Nor do I. And I often require that of others. You know, I require that others not be offended. I think everyone should stick around for the third segment of the Will Cain Show. Just let me show you exactly how I live, my requirement of others. I think it's going to be a real treat for you when it comes to Fox and Friends. But, James, you and I were there. We weren't in the garden yet when that joke was told. And actually, you and I went in with Tony Hinchcliffe.
Yeah.
You and I, when we entered Madison Square Garden, he was out on the street, smoke break. He was having a cigarette.
And I think that cigarette was to try to calm some of the nerves of what he was feeling. Like the first thing he said to us, he's like, yeah, the Harris HQ, they clipped it. It's everywhere, and I'm getting slack for it. And like
He
you could
said
tell,
that
he was shaking.
He went back into the garden with us. We rode the elevator together. It was the first time I'd ever met Tony. He was a super nice guy. It was great to talk. We talked about Texas. He immediately told us, yeah, one of my jokes has already been clipped by Kamala HQ. Now, Kamala HQ is a troll account that is, I think, actually officially affiliated with the Kamala Harris campaign. It's a troll account that does this. And by the way, it is a huge offender of misinformation. Like, it does the thing where it takes people out of context, and it will tell you, it'll give you the world through the looking glass. It'll tell you Donald Trump was unwell and on the edge of insanity on Joe Rogan, presuming that you'll never listen to the 3 hours of Donald Trump on Joe Rogan. It'll just paint for you a false reality. So I kind of blew it off when Tony Hinchcliffe told me, yeah, I've already been clipped by Kamala HQ. And it wasn't until really late last night or this morning that I realized this joke has become the story of Madison Square Garden. That he was just sort of rattled. I think it's clear. He was a little shaken up when we were walking in together because he already saw this thing just exploding all over at least X. Now, as we wake up today, it's all over CNN and MSNBC, and I'm sure the New York Times and the Washington Post. But Dan, you are you like comedy. You thought I was going to say you're a lefty.
Yes, I did.
No, but you have brunch with lefties.
I do.
But you're big on comedy, and you know who Hinchcliffe is. You're actually a big fan. Like you like his stuff.
Yeah.
My thing is, like, I know him because he showed up at the Tom Brady roast, and he became one of the guys that was like, oh, he won the Tom Brady roast. And then I got more exposed to Kill Tony clips on X and Instagram, and he's funny. But you were telling me this is what he does. Like, he's a roast comic.
Yeah, he has a show called Kill Tony, and this is what they do completely. They just bring up comedians and make fun of them. And it's dark, man. It is really dark. So I think just whoever kind of booked him for this just kind of made a mistake. They got to know who he is, and it was the wrong forum for his type of comedy.
Well, let's take this one step at a time. Was it a mistake? So all of us agree, and I think all of us have fairly thick skin, and we probably require it of others. What I mean by requiring it of others is, look, we're all a bunch of white guys. We're not Puerto Rican. So it's always easier to say somebody else shouldn't be offended. You're not offended, and you can say somebody else shouldn't be offended. But I don't think people should be offended. I think we should all spend less time literally trying to be offended. And I get the incentive structure of why we look to be offended because it imbues the offended with power. With victimhood comes power. But I got into my car today outside of Yankee Stadium. Got in, my driver was a dude. Like, I knew it immediately. I think he lifts. Yeah, he was in good shape. He had some tats up and down the arms. I guess the picture I'm trying to paint for you there is, not soft. Not on the surface anybody you'd say, how about this? Is trying to be offended or super interested in playing the Olympics of victimhood. And I noticed on his rearview mirror that he had a Puerto Rican flag hanging. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And so we rode a few miles, and I said, hey, can I ask you a question? He's like, yeah, man, shoot, whatever you got. And I said, are you going to vote? Are you going to participate, in the race for president? And he goes, I was. And I go, you were? And he goes, yeah, I was. And he didn't really, start pouring it all out at that point. But he didn't shut me down either, so I was like, I fished a little bit. I'm like, well, which way were you going to vote? And he's like, well, I was going to vote for Trump. And now I kind of knew what I thought was going on. And I said, so is this about the joke? He goes, hell yeah, it's about the joke. And I'm like, so that joke from yesterday has hit you, penetrated, and put you already into motivated position to say, I'm no longer voting for Trump. He goes, yeah, man, it's bull. He's like, it's not right. It's not cool. It's not a cool joke. And I didn't debate the guy, but I go, but, Trump didn't say it. It was like an opening act. And he's like, yeah, but I don't care. It's at his rally. And, he was convinced that Trump would have pre-vetted the script or the material, which I didn't really debate him, but I mean, zero chance of that.
I don't know.
I mean, zero chance that Trump, I think probably even anyone on his team would have seen that joke ahead of time. I also don't think Tony Hinchcliffe, this is all me guessing, would run it by anybody. And even if he did run it by anybody, I don't think he'd have any way of knowing when he was on script or off script. It's a comedian who does this. And it's straight down the fairway of exactly, as you've described it, Dan, who Tony is when he does his bit. So the point is, I don't think Trump was in on it, but yet this guy was penalizing Trump. And he said to me, and so is my wife and everybody else that I know. Basically told me every Puerto Rican that he knows. By the way, we had a conversation before we got in this. We left Yankee Stadium. He was like, I grew up right there. And he's pointing to these different places in the Bronx, right? And he's like, that's where I did this and that's where I did that. We'd already had a friendly banter leading into this. And I got to tell you, he was emotional. Like, it wasn't only those, like, I'm not interested in debate. It was a little bit like brushback pitches. And I think some of that's just stylistically the Bronx, aggressive speaking. But I said to him, yeah, it's a comedian. And he goes, if he told that basically in a nightclub, it would be different. But he told it from a political rally. And that just makes it different. And what I'm here to tell you is the point of me sharing with you this story is I don't think the guy should be offended. I actually don't think I would be offended. But I don't think it matters what I think. In the end, all that matters is what he thinks and is what he feels. I asked him, are you going to vote for Kamala? He said, no. He's like, I'm just not going to vote. I'm not going to vote. I'm not in. And he goes, and basically, so that's how it feels for everybody I know. Why does it matter? There are 450,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania. It is a tight race in Pennsylvania. Do I think this loses Donald Trump 450,000 Puerto Ricans? No. But could it lose a few thousand? A few tens of thousands? That can be the difference, literally, in the race for president. Again, this isn't what I think. Should you or should you not be offended? It's me describing a reality, at least by one person, that was relayed to me this morning. And what a world if this comes down to the race for president, impacted by Kill Tony. Let's get into that rally a little bit more with story number 1. The description of the rally before it ever took place was laid down by Hillary Clinton. That what we were seeing was something we hadn't seen since 1939. The rally at Madison Square Garden would be that of Nazis. And that is exactly what was told to the public even before kickoff at the Garden. Here is MSNBC teeing it up. You ready? MAGA equals Nazi.
But that jamboree happening right now, you see it there on your screen, in that place is particularly chilling because in 1939, more than 20,000 supporters of a different fascist leader, Adolf Hitler, packed the Garden for a so-called pro-America rally. A rally where speakers voiced anti-Semitic rhetoric from a stage draped with Nazi banners. When a Jewish protester rushed the stage, the Associated Press reported, quote, instantly, a dozen or more stormtroopers set upon him, knocking him down and beating him as he held his head in his arms. Most of his clothing was torn from his body. Later, he was booked for disorderly conduct.
That is MSNBC. But it isn't just MSNBC. Take a look at some of these messages, these posts by various people about what you should know in their minds, what you should know about what took place at Madison Square Garden. This is Mary L. Trump, who's a big anti-Donald Trump person. She posted, so we're really doing this again. Eyes wide open with side-by-side pictures of 1939 and 2024. Here is D.L. Hughley, comedian, openly on the left, Democrat. D.L. Hughley said, they played this song before Byron Donald went on stage at the Nazi rally at MSG. Saw Byron Donald yesterday, part of the Friends of the Will Cain Show Fantasy Football League. I'm going to be honest with you, one of my favorites. Absolutely one of my favorites. Not being a politician has a real high bar to set on being one of your favorites, but I actually think, and I told the congressman this, I think you got the whole package, man. Like, I really do. It's like, you've got the personality, you've got the speaking skills, you've got the ability to debate. You've got the right policies. You've got the right philosophical bearing. I'm really impressed with Byron Donalds. It was really cool to see him yesterday, James. Right? I mean, and then on top of all that, he's just a dude. Like, he's a dude.
I mean, he's sitting in a room with the most every important figure in his party, and he takes 10 minutes to talk about the Yankees and growing up and Cowboys.
Whatever.
With a 24-year-old dude who has very little place actually being there.
Did you have fun, James?
Yeah, a little bit.
You guys want me to tell you a couple of young establishment James stories real quick?
Yes.
Okay, so here's two of my favorites. James is a certified ignorant clapper. He does not know when to clap. I'm telling you.
No, I'm in too deep.
No, James. I analyzed it. I gave you
that.
time. I did comment, so I know you might be prepared for a rebuttal on this, but I didn't lay out my argument for you yesterday. So you sat right next to me, at least for part of this, and he claps, right? And as the crowd does. But he claps in, like if the crowd claps on 3, he claps on 1. He's on a different beat than everybody else. Yeah, you think it's because you're deeper, like because you hear the music better? No, I'm going to give you an example. Like, so I think it was during RFK. I don't know who it was speaking, but they're like characterizing the other side, right? They're like, the other side thinks this, and it'll be some absurd characterization of a belief on the right. So let's just come up with one. He's like, let's say RFK said, the other side says censorship is good for democracy. And like one person now goes, and it's James. I'm like, why are you clapping, dude? Like, it sounds like you like censorship is good for democracy.
RFK is like, thank you.
He's like, no, man, it's like a good point about the other side. I'm like, have you noticed no one else is clapping? Like, you're the only dude clapping.
Got to stand out. Got to be memorable.
You were clapping for him embodying other people's arguments that you don't agree with.
Yeah, I'm happy that he's taking the fight to them.
And you knew you were off because you'd like give it it went like this, and then kind of look around and stop, you know. And then your clapping is.
You're just not a follower.
I think you should be a follower on clapping.
Yeah.
Don't be a leader.
All right.
Like you notice when you're sitting in the crowd and there's the guy that starts the clapping, and the guy that starts the standing, or the guy that starts the "Go Trump." You don't want to be that guy.
No.
Don't just follow that guy. But that guy usually is. You ever seen the batting average on that guy? It's a bad batting average.
Speaking of comedy, too, like the guy at a comedy show that like laughs at that one weird part of the joke, and he's like, "Oh, thanks, that guy gets it."
But you know the guy that wants to lead the clap or the wave,
I wasn't that far.
or stand up.
That far.
He's a low percentage batter. Like he doesn't hit Hall of Fame numbers. He's probably batting 200. We had 2 of them sitting in front of us, James.
Below Mendoza's line.
Yeah,
and
sure.
the guys sitting in front of us they wanted to lead everything, and so I noticed like. They stood, and that means I had to stand in order to continue to see. But the best part was when they took smoke breaks. Oh, I was so appreciative of that smoke break because they came back reeking of cigarettes, but at least I could see clear view of where I was going.
Yeah.
But they literally stood and only got everybody else to stand and join their clapping around them 20% of the time. So I believe in you, James. You're capable of that kind of thick skin. You could bat low and still keep anteing up. Here's another James story. So for some reason, he comes in and out. I don't know if he's on ADD drugs, and I don't know if James is on cocaine or what he's doing, but he can't sit still. And so he's in and out. He's in and out. And I think he got self-conscious
Welcome to my life.
about asking people down the row if he could get out again. So he goes out finally, and sitting behind me is a row, I bet 20 New York Fire Department, right? All behind me. All in boom, starched blues. They look like $1 million, right? So James, I guess now he's self-conscious that he's gone in and out of our row too many times. He decides, okay, instead what I'll do is I'll go down the row behind Will. It was full of firemen, and I'll come over.
Well, I thought the seats could have been moved. They were fold-them-up chairs, so I was like, I'll just move the chair.
It's a move you would pull at a baseball stadium where the seats are angled and elevated, and you can easily step down into another row.
I thought you could have just moved the chair.
But this was flat.
The chairs were
stuck
flat, and they were stuck to the ground.
And they're stuck to the ground, and they're affixed to each other.
Found that out after.
So he commits to this row. Now he's got like, I'd say 7 or 8 of the firefighters to get up and let him by. And I'm like, what are you going to do? I looked at him and go, what are you going to do? And I go, are you about to like hop a row or stride a row? And he goes,
I thought
yeah.
you encouraged it.
And my man just absolutely high centers himself on the backs of the chairs. He steps over. He can't get over it.
No,
you know,
that's not true.
James, don't act like there wasn't contact.
Slow and smooth.
You were not only was there contact, weight down. you were racking yourself. You were set high center on those chairs trying to go over.
I don't know. I stayed out too late the night before.
That's why you asked for like 5 waters.
Yeah.
Where'd you guys get those waters?
Yeah.
Like, I gave you a water. He goes, I already crushed it. I needed another water. Back to the Nazi rally. This is what was said by Alex Vindman. You know, Vindman, he's a famous patriot of Curb Your Enthusiasm, famous patriot of outing Donald Trump on Ukraine. He tweeted out, I've resisted calling Trump and MAGA fascist, mainly because I've understood fascism and Nazism as almost incomprehensibly evil. But the reality is MAGA is today who the Nazis were before they seized power. There is no better historical comparison to MAGA than the Nazis of the early 1930s. Now, I think you can attest to this, James. Jews, blacks, Puerto Ricans, Latinos, gays, everybody at Madison Square Garden yesterday. It was the most diverse Nazi rally in the history of Nazi rallies. And by the way, they took the stage. Every single one from that representative group took the stage and had their moment to shine and had their moment to talk about, if you want, their identity and its approach to MAGA. You had multiple black Americans, from Byron Donalds to the founder of Death Row Records. You had Tony Hinchcliffe, by the way, not a straight man. You had Sid Rosenberg, Jew, who today, by the way, they're sharing a clip of him who sarcastically goes, I guess this is a Nazi rally. And they're seriously posting today, they're saying the quiet parts out loud. Like Sid Rosenberg, Jewish man, says the quiet parts out loud that it's a Nazi rally. They're beside themselves and they're insane. And they're certifiably insane. And they were set up for this insanity by Hillary Clinton, who said ahead of time that this would be reminiscent of 1939. She went and said the following. She said on CNN that she agrees with John Kelly that Trump is a fascist and knows that Trump is about to reenact the Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden of 1939. I did not see one Nazi flag. I did not see one element of white supremacy. I saw Israeli flags.
A lot of them.
I saw Israeli flags.
You know, speaking of guys who are trying to be the first one to start the rally, there was those 2 frat boys to the left of us with the Jewish flags, and it was like every 5 minutes when Trump was up, that they tried to start the Jews for Trump rally, and there's a lot of dudes there. It's
Absurd to dismiss this as a white supremacist, fascist rally for Nazis. It's simply not an accurate reflection of reality. I was there. Young Establishment James was there. Laura Ingraham was there. Raymond Arroyo was there. Tammy Bruce was there. Rachel Campos Duffy was there. I know many people that can attest to first-person accounts of what this was like. And I will tell you, it was incredibly patriotic, meaning it's leaning into the songs, the symbols, and the imagery of the United States of America. It was happy. It was not anger from that stage. There was nobody angry in the audience and nobody angry on the stage. And to say that it was a parade, as I saw it said, a parade of insanity. Well, Elon Musk, the world's richest man, does that not on its own say something about the credibility behind this movement? Robert F. Kennedy Jr., one of the leading candidates from the other party running for president, Democrats, now endorsing Donald Trump. Tulsi Gabbard, a former presidential candidate as a Democrat, on that stage for Donald Trump. And I think in part, this is why they rolled the dice to say, let's bring in Tony Hinchcliffe, because it showed the expanded reach of this movement, that it's also now even cool in pop culture. I think that was the reach to bring in Tony Hinchcliffe. It was a mistake, as you point out, Dan, on a booking, because it's not a comedy club. It's a political rally. But it was a political rally that was nothing reminiscent of 1939. And it's only comparable to Nazis if you think the same of America. Let's break all this down. Let's also dive into Donald Trump on Joe Rogan with a Democratic strategist coming up on The Will Cain Show. Was he a meandering old man, unwell, evidenced of increasing madness on Joe Rogan? Or was Donald Trump a person, revealing his humanity, showing more of the man, Donald Trump. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page. Hey, hit subscribe on Apple or Spotify. Leave us a 5-star review if you think it's so deserved. Leave a comment. As you'll see in just moments here on the Will Cain Show, I bring comments into the show. I bring calls into the show. I bring you, the Willisha, into the Will Cain Show. And subscribe to us. Leave a comment. Join the community and join the debate below this live stream on YouTube or Facebook. Brad Howard is the president of Corcoran Street Group. He's also a Democratic strategist, and he joins us now on the Will Cain Show. Hey, Brad.
Hey there. How's it going, Will?
Glad to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
I know that you may have been around. You heard some of what I had to say. I don't know if you've been here since the top of the show to hear my take, not just on whether or not what we saw in New York at Madison Square Garden was another rally for Nazis, but also what I had to say about what seems to be the takeaway in the story of the day, which is a joke by comedian Tony Hinchcliffe about Puerto Rico. If you did, I'd love to hear your response to what I had to say, which is, in short, as a paraphrase, absurd that it was a Nazi rally. I was there. I was in the audience. There's nothing comparable to 1939. And although I don't like it when people are offended, and I'm not giving license to somebody being offended, and I don't think we should play in the realm of I'm offended, therefore I'm a victim, and therefore I have power. I have a firsthand experience this morning of asking a Puerto Rican guy, hey, what were you going to do in this election? And he told me this morning, I'm not doing what I was going to do, which was vote for Trump, because I'm mad. And I'm mad as hell about that joke. So that's what we've been talking about this morning, Brad. I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, and thanks, Will. I always appreciate the way you look at issues because I think too often people box them in a certain area of response and don't critically think through it. I think you're right. I think there's different various levels and ways in which people are offensive, and we may not understand where people are coming from that are different than us. Totally get it. But I think it's less about whether or not this is offensive, whether or not the series of speakers, I think this comedian also made a watermelon comparison to black people, a sexual reference to Latinos. Like it was bizarre. But again, people aren't equating that. I don't think most voters blame Trump for what he said. What I think this is a greater focus on is either Trump knew he was going to say that stuff and the campaign did, and they let him go on the stage, which I doubt, because I think what's more likely is this scenario, that they just didn't vet him. They kind of knew what he was known for. They kind of knew his angle, knew his personality and what he usually does on stage. But this goes to the issue of competency, I think, with Donald Trump that has hindered him from day one of the candidate, of being president. And now that if he could just be more organized and effective and actually finish through of the things he wants to do, he could be a much more efficient, powerful figure. But it's very limiting to him. And so I think it's an example of kind of that concern over competency that both makes independent voters rethink him as president, because we saw the consequences of that during the pandemic. And again, it's not fully to blame for Trump because we didn't know hardly anything in the pandemic, but he did go to the podium and say some things that could put lives in danger, and they were just kind of bizarre during a time when people were looking for steady reassurance. And I think it's probably led to one of the issues that cost him the 2020 election. So I think when you look, I think swing voters, if you are undecided at this point in the election, you know who Donald Trump is very well. You know enough about Kamala Harris to make a decision. If you're still not with Donald Trump and more people know more about him, that tells me that they're probably 9 out of 10 are not going to vote for him. They're going to break towards the challenger. That's usually how the status quo works. Trump realizes that too. So what Trump is doing is a different strategy than Kamala. Here's where I think it's genius. And real quick, Trump is going after low propensity voters. That's the term we use in politics. They are voters who may have voted 0 or once out of the last 4 elections. There are a ton of them. However, the challenge with these low propensity voters is they're not familiar with voting, right? It's not a muscle memory. They have to learn it. They have to figure out how to register, where to go, what IDs to bring, et cetera. So it is a huge challenge to get those people and turn them out. You don't have to persuade them. They're sitting there, right? They're just on the couch at home, in the basement, whatever. Kamala's strategy is very different. She's going after high propensity voters that are college educated, that have probably what I call the country club Republicans, that are kind of disillusioned with Trump's campaign and rhetoric. But they're the ones that she's really after. If she can swing enough of the 6 to 8 battleground states, that's probably enough to win, because she's just got to persuade. Right. Her side is fired up for Donald Trump against Donald Trump.
Let's get into some of the voting in just a moment. I want to stick with the vote and your your thought that it is representative of a lack of coordination, organization, or competency in putting together a team to lead.
Right.
Now, you taking a joke at Madison Square Garden by comedian Tony Hinchcliffe and extrapolating it
Not one
into
joke.
including Donald Trump's decision making, and that it's symbolic of even what happened at during COVID is absurd. And I'm going to tell you why in a moment. But I won't want you to take the bait. I sat through and let you do that, so I want you to indulge me on how I organize this conversation. I'm going to tell you why I think thematically it's absurd. But before we do get into that, I want to actually get more granular for a second.
Sure.
Because you brought it up. Tony Hinchcliffe told jokes that night, yesterday, about blacks, as you point out, that anyone who wanting to be offended absolutely could be.
Right.
He told
And
jokes,
the left is always going to be offended.
and he told jokes about Latinos, to your point as well.
Yeah,
That is ammunition if you want to be offended. You know what's interesting? Those aren't leading CNN. Those aren't everywhere right now. I actually find that kind of fascinating. I'm not sure I totally have the answer.
Well, they're baked
Why
in, right?
is this joke about Puerto Rico the one on the lower third of CNN? And if I'm being cynical, Brad, it's like, well, is it because there's 500,000 Puerto Ricans in Pennsylvania and it could actually be a difference maker? But then I had this conversation in the hallways of Fox this morning of somebody who said this is why you're hearing this one used as ammunition and not the other two. I said, yeah, but if you really like put fire under the joke about Mexicans, then maybe you could make a difference in Arizona. Or if you put fire under the joke about blacks, you could maybe make a difference in Georgia, right? It's just odd how we pick and choose what we're offended by, and it's hard not to be cynical when the truth is, when we break it all down, Tony is an offense. This is what he does. He's a comic, and he makes offensive jokes.
So, Will, here's the real reason. Because Republican elected officials openly criticized him on social media and have said he went too far. That was what's newsworthy about the Puerto Rican comments.
You're right.
That's why
By the way,
CNN is carrying
who
the
are
lower
they?
third.
Like Florida Senator Rick Scott.
Correct.
And there were
And
some
then-
others, to your point.
Yeah, and there's the New York, the Republicans, the ones where there are pockets of Puerto Rican voters everywhere. But the highest density population of Puerto Ricans, who are citizens, by the way, they're born even if you're born on the island, you're considered. If you move to New York, you immediately can register, like you are an American citizen if you're born on the island of Puerto Rico. So they move here and they're instantly able to vote. They don't have to. There's no the qualification. You just sign a thing and you're registered. And they're in New York. The second largest population is in Central Florida. I was chief of staff to a member of Congress for 6 years. In the House, we had the second or third highest density of Puerto Ricans anywhere in the country. So we know a lot about this. When anybody of their own party criticizes the campaign of their nominee, that is newsworthy. So that's really what this is after. That's how it got to your argument about salience. That's why it jumped up. Here's the other reason. Puerto Ricans on the island vote Republican. Their delegate to Congress is a Republican. If you made Puerto Rican a state today, it would have, according to most estimates, 4 to 5 House members. That's how big the island is, right? So it'd be bigger than the state of Arkansas, be bigger than the state of Montana. They would have 5 delegates in the House. And I would argue most of those would probably be Republican. Now, but we don't know that because the politics of the island is that the Democrats support status quo, the Republicans support statehood. So that's how it does there. Once Puerto Ricans move to the U.S., however, a lot of them trend the Democratic column because of just the way they're seeing, and Puerto Ricans are very proud people. They're proud to be American. They're proud to be Puerto Rican. Sometimes they equate them at the same level. But they're very proud people. It's a large part of their identity and pride comes from being from Puerto Rico. So when you attack Puerto Rico, you're offending all of these voters over here who have family members back home, who have businesses back home, who go back a lot, especially after the hurricanes that destroyed the island when Trump was president. All that goes to the fact that it's like if someone went to Europe and said America's trash, we would all be offended. But more so there because people question their even existence if they could qualify to be a state when they've got a strong economy, they've got a beautiful geography, they've got amazing people, food and culture. Like I would welcome them with open arms. It would add to the rich diversity that makes America great. So when they hear that rhetoric, it offends them.
I hear you.
It's a different kind of
I
offense.
want to go to your larger theme now, Brad, the part that I find absurd. I don't find anything you just said to be absurd. I know there's a strong affinity for your Puerto Rican heritage and identity, and I think it's illustrated by the conversation I heard this morning. But now you saying, okay, this is a little window into the bigger problem, which is Donald Trump's decision making. No, there is no way. And you agreed, so we're not going to debate that point, that Donald Trump's team vetted this comedy bit. Now, what I think happened is, it's the only decision-making process that went into probably putting Tony Hinchcliffe on that stage, which, by the way, I probably would have done the same. I don't know. I might have made this mistake, is Republicans have never had, in my lifetime, street cred. Do you know what I mean by street cred? Like pop culture acceptance. They just haven't. Like, you know.
I think in the country music scene, I grew up in Arkansas, rural Arkansas, country music, particularly after 9/11. There was a big rally. I think Republicans did have a lot of.
Yeah, I guess country music's the best example.
Yeah, country music, I think it's still there.
Like, country music is its own world.
Well, it's becoming more pop-like, in my opinion, but that's a different story.
Yeah, we could have
so
that
it's expanding, yeah.
For sure. By the way, check out Zach Top. Big fan
yes.
of Zach Top.
Agreed.
My kids keep turning me on to real music. It's the weirdest thing that my kids have. My kids at age 16 and 13 have way better musical taste than I did at 16, 13.
Well, they have also different ways of getting music than we did. I had to get my CDs at Walmart that have the explicit taken out.
Right.
When I grew up. So.
Right. I think that breaking into this world of Joe Rogan and Shane Gillis and Tony Hinchcliffe is attractive to Republicans, attractive to MAGA. And I think that is what led them to, like, hey, you know who we could get? We could get Tony Hinchcliffe. That would be awesome. Let's get Tony Hinchcliffe. And I think that was kind of the end of it, not, what do you think Tony Hinchcliffe would do on this stage? I don't think there was a lot of like, what do you think he'll do once you give him a microphone? Because the answer is, he'll do what he always does. He'll be Tony Hinchcliffe. And again, that's why I don't think anybody should be offended, but I'm a grown-up enough to know, well, but sometimes people are offended, and you should have expected this because a comedy club is different from a stage at a political rally.
Yeah, and I think, too, when you look at it, my point is being that I've run campaigns before. There's risk in putting comedians. I think there's been White House comedians or events where a comedian spoken at the White House. I think Barack Obama experienced this with, I think, Common. If you go back and look at some of those comments, he said some things that set up a firestorm afterward. So we have a history of holding people accountable who organize these events, and the people that speak at them. And my point of the campaign operative side is you want to reduce any political negative consequences that could come out of the event. So you usually have a conversation with the speakers and say, don't say this kind of stuff, right? So the fact they didn't do that, and here's the other big issue. So even if you disagree with me on this point, why has the Trump campaign not sincerely apologized to Puerto Ricans for elevating those comments and giving him a microphone?
They did put out a statement already saying this does not reflect our views of Puerto Rico or Puerto Ricans. They did put out that statement.
No, but they didn't apologize to the people that were
just
offended.
Kind of ramping the bar. Like,
well, no, I'm just saying, like,
this
that's
is
the
more
first thing
like,
you do.
At some point,
we made a mistake.
You're
I'm
just
sorry.
doing it to do it, and you're going to hold him to a standard that never is satisfied. It's like the very
disassociating,
fine
not
people
apologizing.
thing. Like, it's like he never condemned them. Well, actually, he did condemn them, and he condemned them in the very next sentence. But it was this constant thing of like, you know, he never condemned these statements. He's
doesn't need to
already
condemn it. He
said
just
that those
needs to
statements don't
apologize.
reflect the campaign or their views of Puerto Ricans.
The campaign gave him a microphone and a platform and an audience to say things that offended very critical electorate. And if you want to regain their trust and confidence, the first thing you do is say, I'm apologizing. We didn't mean to do that, whatever, how you say. And then, like, here's how I'm going to help you, and I hope you'll still vote for us. Like, you gotta show some contrition there. And I think that'd be the biggest. That's what I would advise my client to do, is just say, be honest. We didn't know he was going to say that. Does not speak for the campaign. We apologize. We hope to put this past
he's already
us.
put out a statement, and my suspicion is you'll probably hear more. I bet you do. I
hope so. I don't hope so, but
I bet you'll hear directly from Trump. And by the way,
yes.
I don't wish this for him because I actually like the guy. I bet you Trump's super mad at Tony. I'll bet he's super mad at Tony Hinchcliffe because, I mean, you know, like he was mad about the Project 2025 guys, like all of a sudden defining who he was in his campaign. He's going to be mad that this is the thing, and it's not going to go well.
I think, Will, I have a question for you. I'm curious, when you look at the long-term play here, right? You see a country that's diversifying every day. You know, I love it when Republicans say Democrats want to sneak people across the border illegally and then illegally register them to vote so they'll vote. If we did that, that'd be a very dumb idea because Hispanics do not always break towards Republicans. I mean, toward Democrats. They're actually a pretty diverse. I mean, a lot of them in a lot of places are really 50-50.
Hold on. But I just as you're setting this up, you said, I want you to do this question with me, but I also want you to be 100% fair in the way you set this up. you wouldn't be doing it because you're making a play for always. You'd be doing it because historically Democrats get 60% of the Hispanic vote.
In
and
some
if you
parts of
lose
the country.
40%, it's a win for you.
In South Florida, Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton by 16
It
points
ain't
with Hispanic
Cubans
voters.
come across the border there, Brad.
They're coming across a water border, but not the Southwest
But
border.
we're not talking about Cubans fleeing Fidel Castro as the ones that would flip the vote
There's
for Democrats.
Venezuelans that are in South Florida too. There's, all kinds of, I'm just saying, like, I just think the long-term strength of the party, I would be refocusing my efforts to try to win over some of these diverse constituencies.
And they
rather
are,
than
Brad. But that's happening.
Last night was not an outreach to diverse constituencies. I'm sorry, it just wasn't.
No, you mean in general or Tony's part?
In general, there's other ways that campaigns involved, but in the closing days,
you're wrong.
you have this.
You're wrong.
In the closing days, you have this rally, which could be a closing argument type rally, which is meant to show, like, drum up your base of support and do some outreach to persuadable voters. He didn't do that last night, and probably
you're wrong.
All the fanfare around it.
No, you're wrong. And I was there. Tony's bit is not going to end up being good for outreach to quote unquote diverse voters. But the rest of the rally, if only seen through the looking glass of the lens of the way it's painted on CNN or even through your algorithm on X, was not what was experienced in real life. It was a highly
them calling
diverse.
Hillary Clinton a sick son of a witch, but not use the W word.
Well, that's not evidence of anything to do with diversity. What I'm talking about is who took the stage, who was in the audience, the kind of messages relayed. And by the way, what's showing up in the polling suggests this has been a big movement among Republicans where we'll see how it plays out, Brad. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah.
But it looks right now that Donald Trump will outperform almost every historical Republican when it comes to the black vote, the Latino vote.
I agree with all this.
Every other vote.
I agree with that. I think there are. My point is, I think they would be going in higher numbers if there was an exerted effort to, in rhetoric and in tactics, to welcome people who aren't white Native Americans.
That is happening. See, here, I'm going to move on, but I'm going to give
you...
you...
It is to an extent, but you could be much more successful.
Well, here's the problem. I'm going to move on because I want to play some sound with you in just a second here. But you know the allegory of Plato's shadows on a wall. You take a couple of prisoners, they're tied up, there's a campfire behind them or a fire behind them, and reflections of other people, shadows dancing on a wall. And these prisoners only ever see those shadows, and they begin to think that's reality, right? That's the real world. At some point, one of them breaks free, gets out, sees the real world, comes back, tells guys, hey, these shadows aren't the real world. There's another world out there. We've got to go see it. And he breaks their chains. They go out. The real world shocks them. They return to their cave and kill the guy that showed them reality. My point is, you can only think the Republican Party is not making an outreach to small, diverse, not small, but diverse constituencies if you're seeing the shadows on the wall as your perception of reality. It's what's being told to you. It's the idea that this was a Nazi rally before the rally even took place in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, the only thing I'll say is that my point is he is seeing success, and here's why. It's because he is focusing on cultural issues that draw Hispanic and Latino voters into the Republican Party. And I think that Democrats have got to figure that issue out because it's why we're losing support. Trump, I think, could have more of a growth with, for instance, Latinas and other demographics, particularly in South Texas and in Arizona, if he would have, number one, a campaign rhetoric that reflected and invited them in, and number two, and I think a lot of them are turned off by it, and I think we can agree that what Trump says does turn off some voters who want sensible, responsible
usually
leadership.
Only by hearsay, not direct testimony.
Okay, then that tells me that he needs to do a better job
of actually hearing what Donald Trump said.
Well, because last night, if you said amazing things about Hispanics at large or whatever, it got drowned out because of the comedian's comments. That's why you go as a campaign, you try to reduce the damage so your message can push through.
Right. Okay, speaking of direct testimony from Donald Trump, he spent 3 hours with Joe Rogan. I wanted to share a little bit with you and get your feedback and see your thoughts. I thought it was incredible. It's another one of these through the looking glass. If you hear other people only tell you what they thought about it, then you're going to believe what they said or agree with what they thought about it. All I encourage everyone to do is go spend some time yourself and listen to it. Because you'll hear stuff like this, Donald Trump talking, honestly, about history and things you wouldn't expect him to talk about. For example, Abraham Lincoln.
He lost his son, and they suffered, the two of them suffered from melancholia. They didn't call it depression. They called it melancholia, and they suffered from it. He was a very depressed guy, and she was a very depressed woman, more so than him. And on top of that, they lost their son, whose name was Ted. And it was just seeing it in the little pictures, a little tiny picture. I mean, you can't see the details there. Little tiny, everything the way it was. A little tiny picture of Tad, who he lost, and it was devastating. And he was, he was in a war. He was having a hard time because he couldn't beat Robert E. Lee.
All right, and then he goes into this entire history of Robert E. Lee. Brad, he's on his weave. I think the question was, what's your biggest mistake? And it goes from answering your biggest mistake all the way into the military genius of Robert E. Lee. And you have to understand the roads that got him there, like how he got into Lincoln and he got into this because he's standing in the Lincoln bedroom and how incredible the hallways are at the White House. And look, here's the thing. Like even me doing that is what the left, oh my God, what kind of insanity and rambling are you talking about? It's part of a longer thing where he does this weave and he goes down this, but he always does come back home to the original question about the mistake. But along the ride, you're like, this guy knows a fair amount about history. He knows a lot about doing business and permitting in New York City and the way to deal with regulation and construction. I don't know, Brad. I don't think that many people will listen to the full 3 hours, but if you did, I think you'd get a different picture than the one that's painted again on CNN.
Well, if you watch any of his rallies, it's not that surprising, right? This is what Trump does. He's a storyteller, and I think it's why his rallies have an entertainment element that draws people in. He's very effective at it. Guy. One of the advantages of being older is you learned more along the way, and you've had chances to study, and expand your outlook. And I think the Lincoln story is a particularly effective one at trying to reach people, because I think losing a child is just unfathomable to everyone and to any parent. And I think it does. He was smart to bring it up and talk about it the way he did, because it does show empathy for a figure that is typically not presented as empathetic. And so I think, he talks about that. I think, any parent can't fathom that tragedy, and to have that tragedy, be president and defend the Union, that was a lot on one man's shoulders. Do
you think Kamala could do it, Brad?
Tell a very brief high-level overview of Abraham Lincoln's loss of a child? No,
do 3 hours with Joe Rogan.
Yes. I think.
Do you really?
Look,
be real. Come on, man.
But I would advise her against it.
That doesn't surprise me, Brad, because of what you described earlier. You're a
I would advise
strategist,
any candidate,
and you've got the risk-reward part of it. But I don't think you're being honest. I mean, you tell her not to do it because you know she bombed 3 hours with Rogan.
Okay, well, she can physically sit at a microphone and talk for 3 hours. She absolutely can.
Yeah, so can my dog Violet. My dog Violet can sit at a microphone for 3 hours.
So
she ain't going to pull it off to get any votes.
Well, then don't suggest she can't do it.
I guess the definition of what can and can't is all of a sudden we've devolved into Bill Clinton semantics. The question is, can she do a Q&A, man? A push back and forth. Look, Rogan said it well. He goes, I'm not going to interview her. I want to have a conversation with her. But a conversation, you and I are having a conversation, right? Yeah. I'm not interviewing you, but I'm pushing back where I disagree, and I'm soliciting more where I think there's depth. That's what it is, and I don't think she'd thrive in that environment.
Let's just remember that she, very early in her career, was a prosecutor who prosecuted multinational criminal gangs. Like, that's a fact. So she has stood up in a very intense situation and presented a case numerous times over her career as an attorney. So, like, she can do it. That's not the question. But my point about Trump's competency factor, I think Kamala's campaign is literally like almost too careful in how they approach bringing her out in the media. Like, you can be too careful. You can be not careful enough. And I think both of these candidates kind of have those problems a little bit.
To your point, I'll play one more clip for you. Trump talk about why he gets so much publicity. And this is a little bit of an example of the pushback that Kamala should expect. But here's Rogan telling Trump, hey, man, here's why you get publicity.
I always got more publicity than other people. And it wasn't like I was trying. In fact, I don't know exactly why. Maybe you can tell me why.
Oh, I could definitely tell you. You said a lot of wild shit.
Maybe. Maybe that's
I mean, first of all, you got to love that Donald Trump calls it publicity, right? I mean, I don't know another candidate that calls it publicity.
And he actually is talking about even back to his celebrity days. He's kind of right, though. It is interesting how much publicity he gets. And he kind of always did, even when he wasn't a presidential candidate.
He's a master of showmanship. I mean, he just is. Like, he's very brand aware. and
Yeah.
has been since probably birth,
Right.
in a weird way. And I think, when you're competing in the New York media scene, as he came about in the 80s and 90s, that's how you got attention, was saying, do crazy stuff that, that breaks through the New York Times editorial board, et cetera. So it makes a lot of sense that that's the school of thought of which he comes from. So,
I got to run, but here,
Yeah.
I'm just going to end this with some honesty, okay? I'm
Okay.
going to get some pure, unadulterated, just 100% Colombian honesty from you. If you were advising Kamala, and she's like, I've got this invitation from Rogan, you don't even have to tell me your reasoning, Brad. Your answer would be somewhere between hell no and F no.
And again, here's why, because I think she is smart right now to go after this slither of persuadable voters that are high propensity voters and kind of what I call disillusioned country club Republicans. They're not listening to Joe Rogan. So go where they're listening.
That's what
not
you
Joe
tell
Rogan's
Kamala.
a wasted effort.
Right. That's what you tell Kamala.
That's what I tell you.
Yeah. And then when she walks out of the room, you turn to the other strategist and go, I mean,
no,
thank God, because that would have been a disaster, boys. And you guys all high five and say, see you in 2028.
You run a campaign that you need to target your persuadable voters. You go where the voters are. The persuadable voters generally are not listening to Joe Rogan because they are highly educated, suburban country club type Republicans, kind of the Mitt Romneys of the world, that are out there. And that's why you see Liz Cheney on stage and not going to Joe Rogan.
You go down with Liz Cheney, Trump goes down with Tony Hinchcliffe. Brad, thanks for being on the Will Cain Show today, man.
Yeah,
it's always
thanks,
fun. I appreciate it. That's Brad Howard, president of Corcoran Street Group, a Democratic Strategist. I'm going to give you another piece of sound from Joe Rogan, but I'm also going to play you a piece of sound to Will Cain when it comes to the World Series. You don't want to miss it. Don't go anywhere. Speaking of being offended, wait till you hear this sound from my phone. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe and jump into the comment section. Leave us a 5-star review. Leave a comment and hang out with us every day on YouTube or Spotify and Apple. Here's what you're saying in the comment section. Flippin' Yucky on YouTube says, I'm Puerto Rican and knew this was going to happen when the joke was said. Puerto Ricans talk trash about the island all the time, but God forbid an outsider does. It was a joke. Hashtag Trump 2024. Darillo5 says, they could have done without having killed Tony. Unforced error. Tributes in Triumph says, the fault is not Tony's. It's whoever thought it was a good idea to book him for this. And on and on. It's interesting. Most of it is saying things like, this from Andy Q. It's, if a stray joke can swing a national election, you have really lost the plot. But Unique Metal on YouTube says, I'm a Puerto Rican in Florida, and I was going to vote for Trump, but not now. Harris, you just got my vote. It is insane if this election comes down to a joke from Kill Tony. Donald Trump was on Joe Rogan, and he was explaining, once again, the weave to Rogan, where he goes down this road and back down this road, but says he never forgets the highway. And Rogan goes, okay, but we're pretty far off road.
Because you cannot be voting for Kamala. Kamala, you're not a Kamala person. I know you. I've watched you. I know him better than he is. You know what? Without speaking to you, I think I know you maybe almost as well as your wife. I have watched you for so many years. You're not a Kamala person. You're a Khabib person, but you're not a Kamala person. Nobody's going to know who Khabib is, but
they know who
he was not bad, right? That guy.
Oh, he was phenomenal.
But that's your kind of
your
person.
weave is getting wide. We're getting wide with this weave.
But isn't it
I want to
much
bring it
better?
back to tariffs.
But wait one second before we finish with tariffs.
Here we go. That's where he calls him out on his weave in the conversation there with Joe Rogan. All right, you guys excited? Everybody here is excited. Everybody here is a Yankees fan here on the Will Cain Show. You guys feeling good? You're down 2-0. You're not looking good. I would feel really good if I were a fan of LA.
They're good.
Yeah, I mean, they're not just completely outplaying us, so that's one thing I feel good about. It's been close, but we were 1 out away in game 1. So.
And they had a pitcher's performance in game 2.
Sure.
With Yamamoto. Their bats were alive in game 1 with the grand slam. If they're winning all ways, I think it's troublesome for you.
Yeah.
I think it's troublesome for you.
Home field advantage is going to be big.
Did you guys hear my analysis on Fox and Friends this morning?
I didn't check it yet.
It's good baseball analysis. You want to hear it?
Sure.
You got to win the first 2 or 3 innings of game 3.
Yes.
right?
Correct.
You agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You got to come out hot. Someone's got to hit a home run in the first 3 innings.
Right. Because the Dodgers are set up for a bullpen game in Game 4. So make them get to their bullpen early in Game 3, and now you've put them behind the 8 ball for 2 games. Now you're looking at tying the series, and that's all coming down to the first 3 innings of Game 3. So I was explaining this to the Fox and Friends guys this morning, okay? Speaking of being offended, right, and who chooses to be offended, I thought I wanted to share this with you. I gave it some thought. Should I put this on blast? I'm like, hey, you put me on blast. And I you know how I am. Like, if I like you, I mess with you, right? That's who I am. By the way, I'm not unique. I think most dudes do this, right? If I don't like you, I barely acknowledge your existence. There are other guys who will attack you. I don't attack people. Like, if I don't like you, it's not my goal to let you know that. I just don't have anything to do with you, right? But if I'm coming after you and I'm, making jokes, odds are I like you. So, of course, I like Lawrence Jones. So I take my chance, and I start making fun of Lawrence just a little bit, just, bringing a little personality back into the show that he doesn't know baseball. I actually didn't even know that he doesn't know baseball, but it turns out he doesn't. He doesn't know baseball. And I might have hit him in like a little bit of a sensitive spot, but he's not. I mean, Lawrence is a big boy, and he doesn't. He and I have been texting about it because I sent him this voicemail that I got this morning.
Fan of the morning show, Fox and Friends. I'm a rich white lady who lives in a very expensive condo on the beach in South Florida, and I am really upset. I'm mortified.
Let's just pause for a minute. What's that?
Nothing.
She has self-identified as a rich white lady that lives on a very nice condo on the beach in Florida. Okay, I just think we all need to take a minute with our highlighters, pull out our highlighters, and note, self-described rich white lady, very nice condo in Florida. And she's very upset.
The behavior of you this morning on Fox and Friends. And honestly, I'm really happy that Friends has some color, which is more representative of the people who live in this country. You demeaned and embarrassed and humiliated Lawrence on national TV. Lawrence called you out publicly for making fun of him on TV, knowing not much about baseball.
All right, so Lisa is very offended by my behavior. I demeaned and humiliated Lawrence. So Lisa's somewhere at her very nice condo in Florida, sipping on some coffee, big fan of Steve Ducey and Fox and Friends, and has been for a long time. And now here comes Will making fun of the fact that Lawrence doesn't know baseball. And by God, that is the line.
That behavior is unacceptable to viewers who are watching Fox. If that ever happens again, and I've already emailed producers and everyone I could, that's just not acceptable. If you ever act like that again to the one black person on the morning show,
I think she's suggesting I'm racist now. Is she suggesting I'm racist? And it's getting ramped up. If you ever act like that again, this is going somewhere, okay? This is going somewhere.
I'm just done with Fox, and I've been loyal for 50 years. I watch them every morning.
Haven't been on the air for 50 years.
And if it happens again, I will write the most horrific reviews that you have ever seen.
This is the money line. This
Good
pause.
day.
That's the best part. Hold on. That's the best part, the pause. I will write the most horrific reviews you have ever seen. Pause. Good day. So, you can't make everybody happy. You risk them, right, Tony? You risk it. You risk offense. And you just hope it doesn't take down a campaign for presidency or a career at Fox. That's going to do it for me today. I'll see you same time, same place tomorrow. YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, and Apple. See you next time on The Will Cain Show.